Welcome back to the TIE Show, where we roll out the intersection between technology, innovation, and education. On 17th July, we discussed the necessary reforms for digital learning, and we saw that the next big thing that we need to take up for all relevant stakeholders and learning institutions is to adopt digital learning. And today, we have to discuss a very interesting topic that is very well related to the other. That is 5 necessary and sufficient conditions for effective quality learning. Joining us is our guest, Professor Elijah Omwenga. He was our guest on 17th July, and that's why he's very fit to continue on whatever he left, because whatever has a beginning must have an end. As I'd said before, Professor Elijah Omwenga is the current Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and Student Affairs at the University of Kabianga. He is a renowned seasoned software engineer, and he's been having over 25 years experience in both engineering and the teaching sector. Notably, he pioneered an e-learning system, and that is why he's very passionate about digital learning, especially in these times of the pandemic where everything is going virtual. He wants to help you, me, our university, any other person who wants to enhance their learning to know how best they can improve on their education or on their learning by just incorporating technology. Professor, you're welcome back, and tell us more about yourself.
Thank you so much, Leah. It's a pleasure to be back to Bafunde TV.
You're welcome.
As we explore this very important subject on online learning. As you already said, my name is Professor Elijah Omwenga. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of Academic and Student Affairs at the University of Kabianga. Thank you.
Oh, that was quite brief. And today our topic is 5 necessary conditions. So when something is necessary, it's sort of unavoidable. We have to do it now and then. So they are necessary, they are important. So after learning what reforms you can incorporate, then today we see what exactly can we do, that which is necessary and it's sufficient. In case in point is that today we are implementing whatever we learned last time, or we are putting the action move. So Professor, what are these 5 things that we need to come up with? We can list them so that people can know what exactly we need to implement for the reformations we stated to take root.
Thank you so much. Just before we began the show, we were just discussing, I remember, and you asked, why did I list them at 5? Why did I not just say necessary conditions for learning? I thought that it's good to be definite when we know what you're talking about. And here we are referring to 5 conditions which are necessary
and they are sufficient,
for us to have quality e-learning. And I will list them. The first is staff. Highly qualified and trained academic and technical staff who are ready to embrace technology, utilize it for purposes of implementing online learning. Without staff, both technical and academic staff, then e-learning or online learning will be a very big challenge. The second condition is the infrastructure. The infrastructure here, we are referring to the necessary technical infrastructure required, both the e-learning and learning management system, the internet availability, the devices required by the learners, the computers which are necessary for the staff to develop content, and the necessary servers and storage capacities for us to implement online learning. The third condition is the students. You have to have a student body that is already acclimatized to the use of technology, a student body that is ready to embrace flipped classroom approach of learning, where they are the center of the learning process, not the teachers, as it were. The fourth condition is the, in this particular case, the quality content. The content that you're using to enable us achieve the objectives must be of quality. and developed by qualified academia, people who are, great in their own right, in their own disciplines, people who already are well grounded in what they're teaching, so that we're able to capture this great teacher into some kind of a software. So we are modeling a great teacher into the content that will be reflected as part of the whole process of learning. The fifth necessary condition is the policy, various policy and guidelines which are required for us to implement e-learning online, because you may wish to change certain examination regulations. You may have to look at the statutes. You may have to look at even the law that is being enacted to ensure that we have effective online learning. So those are the 5 necessary and sufficient. I call them sufficient because I challenge you to give me any other.
None.
Thank you.
Well, just before we dive into discussing this particular sufficient and necessary conditions for e-learning, I have something for you. You can invite your relative, your brother, your sister, everyone who wants to learn. Then go to our YouTube channel. Remember to click the bell button so that it will alert you on our next show. And then finally drop a question or a comment on the live chat as the discussion flows. Besides, you can drop a comment or a question on our Facebook page and also on our Twitter page. Our hashtag is enhancing learning. So we can now get into discussing this very important topic. And we'll begin by our first that we stated, our staff. So we already have staff, and we are going to look at education from a whole scope, from primary P1 teachers, high school teachers, college tutors, all the way to university lecturers. And so what we want to ask is, what exactly about our staff? Are they well trained, or we need to shift now that we have a paradigm shift on how things are being done from normal or formal to virtual? Should there be a paradigm shift in the method of training teachers, lecturers, and tutors?
Thank you, Leah, for that clarification that you wish me to make and expound on that first condition. See, the staff here are the people who are involved in teaching. Even during the face-to-face mode of instruction, you have lecturers, you have teachers in high school, and of course at the primary level. All these people, they have already gone through the necessary training in terms of the skills required, the knowledge that they need, and of course the pedagogical skills that they have. And therefore, we are saying with that already qualification, that qualification that they have, what else do they need for us to engage them in the online learning process? Here, there are 3 things. The first is to enable them embrace the change. There is need for a change management on how we carry out our teaching. So they must come and get part of the ecosystem of online learning. So change management, the change must be there. They must feel it, that now we are in a new mode of teaching. And that is part of knowledge, engagement. Training must be there for them to embrace the change. That's the second thing, training. Training on how to use technology. And technology comes with its own challenges. It can be very frustrating when you want to use a piece of technology and you find that you don't know how to use it, or in the middle, you have handicaps on how to operate. And therefore, it is important for our staff to be trained on how to use the various technologies. And the first technology here is the e-learning platform. And of course, the electronic platforms for face-to-face teaching. We are talking about things like WebEx, we are talking about Zoom, we are talking about all various types of media used to deliver content. So the lecturer should be well trained to offer training using this media and platform. The third aspect in terms of the teacher is to enable this person to be highly motivated. Motivation comes from within, but it can also come from outside. And intrinsic motivation is when the lecturer or the teacher is able to perform his work well, and the students are able to, pass with good credentials. then the teacher is motivated on one hand. The other hand is when these people are appreciated on the work they have done, shifting online, rather learning from the face-to-face classroom to the online mode. That is very important. So those are the three things which I consider very important in as far as enabling the lecturer or the teacher to be ready to perform online learning.
The teacher is already trained, so the teacher has the necessary skills, but for them to be sufficient, there needs adaptability to technology, there needs training, and the teacher needs to be motivated. It can be intrinsic motivation from within because they are teaching the students and they are feeling satisfied. It can be extrinsic motivation from outside.
Yes, exactly, because they have to be rewarded. You're not going to say now that the teacher or this lecturer was offering face-to-face teaching, now you are doing it online, and therefore you don't earn. No, it is the same thing because you're delivering content, achieving the same objectives, and therefore reward must be there for the effort that they're making.
So my one question before we'll move on to the next necessary and sufficient condition for e-learning to take root is, while motivating teachers, do you think that the Kenyan sector teachers are well motivated, not from within now, from outside? Is the motivation there, or it needs to be added? Because now from within, if I were a teacher, I teach my students, they pass, so I'll be feeling happy that I'm doing something. So from outside, do they need to be rewarded? Should there be a change for them to take up this e-learning system?
Yeah, that's a good question. But you know, motivation in terms of the reward for the work one has done is already there.
Yeah, salary is already
lecturers,
there.
teachers are paid for the services that they render. And therefore, the level of remuneration and other perks which go along with that is well documented. And I wouldn't like to get into that aspect on whether it is sufficient or not. But as we know today, you render a service and you're paid for it.
Yeah.
So that model of payment and the various structures which are there for purposes of remunerating those who offer services to our students and classroom at the classroom level is there, and I think we have to continue to enhance that at every opportunity as per the law providing.
That's nice. So infrastructure is next thing we look at. Whether we need to change our infrastructure now that we're already used to a modern classroom setup where you sit down, the teacher walks in, you have a desk and you're seated and you write, and in the evening you go home, do homework, etc. So we need to change infrastructure so that it will fit an e-learning system. What change are we doing in the infrastructure sector or in the delivery platforms of education? What are we changing so that now we can move from the formal system to the e-learning system, or actually integrate both the two, the formal and digital learning?
Okay, thank you, Leah, for that question. I look at infrastructure from different perspectives. First, you will look at infrastructure for purpose of delivery. The delivery platforms that you want to put in place for you to render content, for you to structure the content in such a manner that it is available for the student to access on the other end. So that is the first set of infrastructure tools that are required. An example of that kind of an infrastructure is the e-learning platform. You require an e-learning platform for you to enable the lecturer model, or rather put in the content for the lecturer, for the student to access on the other end. So that's the first part of infrastructure. The second is the transport mechanism. Here we are talking about the internet connectivity. We are talking about the various modes of delivery through whatever media to the final destination, that is the learner. Then the third aspect of the infrastructure is the access. The learner must access this content which has been delivered over the internet or whatever mode, and the learner needs a smartphone, a smart device, a computer, a laptop, whatever mechanism that the learner wishes to use to access the content. So devices must be provided, or rather the learner should be able to have access to a device. And these devices I've defined could be any of those smartphones, computer, laptop, or any other that you may want to have at your disposal to access the content. But overall, we're also talking about power. Okay, electrical power is part of the infrastructure because you need to have all these devices powered in order for you to access them.
Yeah.
And even the learner may wish to even talk about bandwidth connectivity. You see, once you have the device, it must have the oil in it, and this oil is the bandwidth. So it must be loaded efficiently with sufficient capacity for you to access this content.
So among the things that we're changing in infrastructure, we're looking at delivery and access of that information. You are a lecturer, you've taught students, and at the same time, you've been very passionate in the IT field. So given the times we are, practically, even we can spearhead education by enhancing e-learning even in universities. So with all this, do you think universities should adopt that? And in adopting, what is going to be the problem to the students? Is it accessibility, or the delivery is what is going to make universities experience a hassle in passing education to the student?
I think all of them are important. Whether you're talking about delivery, whether you're talking about access, because you can develop very beautiful content, but if you're not able to deliver it to the ultimate user, then the content is not helpful. So that is important. And there must be structures in place to ensure that universities have developed sufficient delivery mechanisms for this content. If you're looking at a server, it must be hosted somewhere. It must be powered. It must be secured. It has to be having all the necessary cooling systems required for you to have continuous service. So availability of this particular infrastructure on a very high rate, like about 99.7% availability of these resources at any one moment. So that's important. And the second aspect, you're talking about accessibility. Yes, the learner must be able to access the content. And we are now talking about the learner having the initiative to get the necessary devices to access this content. It's like a pen, you know, a computer or a smart device now is just like a pen or pencil that we used to have when you're writing notes. So I see these devices that you're asking that they're available like a pen and paper. So the learner should have the initiative, make the initiative to acquire this pen and paper, which is in the form of a smart device, and be able to access the content. And even the other aspect you talked about, the internet itself. This is now a national issue. We recently launched balloons for delivery of internet in remote parts of this country. It's because of recognizing the need to have accessibility of these materials across the entire country. So it's become a national conversation to ensure that access is available for all the learners wherever they are in any part of the country. And indeed, when you have content online, you don't have to be in a specific place. All you need is an internet connection. You don't have to be in Kenya. You can be in any part of the world and access the content and go through these highly qualified lecturers who have been modeled into the software, the content itself, which is online.
Okay. I hope as a student you're listening, because this is the trajectory we are now going to take. This is the trajectory we are taking. And onto our next question is discussing on the student body. We need a student body who can embrace technology, and we need to change these formal classrooms into flipped classrooms. So how's this going to happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, we are now getting into the idea of having the students at the center of the learning process. Student-centered approach to instruction. We call it the constructivism approach, where the learner helps in the construction of new knowledge and builds upon the knowledge step by step. So we are empowering the learner to have that capacity to build knowledge by himself or herself. So when you talk about a student body that is part of the 5 necessary and sufficient conditions, we are saying the students should be able to embrace the new way of doing things, the new model of teaching and instruction. And when you talk about a flipped classroom approach, we are saying previously the learner has to sit on one end and the lecturer on the other, and there is a lecturing session going on, and the learner is given some materials to go and look at the end of the lecture. We're now saying the other way around. Give the learner the materials in advance, give the learner the questions in advance, and let us discuss at the end. Let us have questions being posed and answering them. Let us pose the questions even to the students themselves. Let the students engage themselves in groups online. We have all these chats which are available. We have Facebook, we have WhatsApp chats, and I can assure you great things are happening on these platforms which are of learning nature. So we are saying the student is now the center of the learning process, as opposed to where the teacher was the center. And the students should be able to embrace this model as groups, as individuals, and as teams.
Okay. Just before we say how we'll set the mindset of a student already used to a formal class setup and change his or her mind to a flipped classroom, that will be our next approach. But before that, we'll go for a break. And don't forget to drop a question or a comment on either of our social media handles, YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. See you after the break as we address you, the student, or you, the lecturer, or you, the teacher, on what needs to be improved.
Perhaps before the break, let me just confirm that flipped classroom approach does not take away the need for practical sessions.
Yeah.
We are saying every course will have a session where you engage in a lecture
directly
method,
with the lecturer,
or you are giving instructions which are followed through some materials which are printed or available online. But there will be practical sessions which will be followed, and I'll discuss more about that when we come back from the break.
Right after the break, that's what we discuss.
Are you a lecturer? Are you a tutor? Are you an instructor? Do you wish to make learning efficient and effective? You can now reach out to your learners online using technology. Introducing Bafunde. Bafunde supports trainers and educators in organizations, universities, and colleges to prepare and deliver digital content to boost interactions and learning. Visit our website at bafunde.com and register now. Bafunde, enhancing learning. Are you a lecturer? Are you a tutor? Are you an instructor? Do you wish to make learning efficient and effective? You can now reach out to your learners online using technology. Introducing Bafunde. Bafunde supports trainers and educators in organizations, universities, and colleges to prepare and deliver digital content to boost interactions and learning. Visit our website at bafunde.com and register now. Bafunde, enhancing learning.
Welcome back, and as promised, we just begin from the practical classes and how they'll be handled while we take the shift from formal classes to the e-learning classes. Professor,
yes,
carry us through.
Yeah, thank you. I was talking about the concept of flipped classroom approach,
yeah.
And we need to confirm that yes, you will have certain materials which are provided online, but also practical subjects require that you engage the student to do the practicals, and various proposals have been made on how to ensure that happens, ranging from having simulation of some of the practical sessions to development of practical objects, practical learning objects. And this is where you develop models across, which can be shared across universities for a specific experiment, for example, and they can be made available for lecturers and learners to access and used to teach specific subjects which require practical attention. the other aspect on practicals is to really package these practicals to be done at the right time, because like word rounds, certainly you cannot have a practical session replaced by any other thing. So indeed that is an area for discussion, and is doable even in small groups. You can engage them at the right time, observing the protocols which are there, and be able to carry on with the delivery of these various courses.
Just before we move on to the next necessary and sufficient condition, the question is, how do you change the mindset of a student to embrace technology?
Good question.
And just before you answer it,
yes,
remember students have embraced technology, but they've embraced it in use of Instagram, Twitter to get what's going on around the world, and Facebook. So we want to understand how you change their mindset. They embrace technology specifically for learning purposes.
Our 21st century students or learners are born on the first day, second day, and third day, first month, fifth month, they're already using technology. And therefore, it is part of that intuitive environment in which they are born into. It doesn't require too much attention and effort to teach a young person on how to use the devices. That's one of the important things that you must do to help somebody embrace technology. It is the utilization, the use of technology. If you're able to go around the challenges of the technical aspects of using technology, then that is a milestone in terms of asking somebody to embrace technology. You can't ask somebody to embrace technology if that technology is difficult to use. But if it is easy, it is available, I can assure you the young people right now have no problem. I can speak with confidence in using technology. You'll see all of them have mobile phones, and some of them are even more difficult to use than a laptop. So there, I feel there's no much work to do. But what is necessary for us is to enable these people to accept that learning can happen online. Effective learning can happen and is happening online. We want to change the mindset that they must see a physical teacher for them to appreciate the learning is taking place. Learning can happen online. Learning can take place anytime, any place, using these various technologies. That is what I want the young people to take home. It is not the physical person who is delivering, but the knowledge that we have captured from this very great teacher into the software, into the learning content, delivered in a structured manner, complemented using other media such as e-meeting applications to enhance that process of learning.
It's not what you see, but what you take after that class, that online class. We've discussed on how we are shifting the mindset of a young person. How then are we shifting the mindset of a teacher not to imagine, I'm going to do this without seeing my students, or I'm going to pre-record this so that I send to my students? How do we then advise the teacher? Because she or he also needs to have a change of mindset.
Yes, sometimes back when we started using technology to support learning, a few years ago, the lecturers or the teachers felt that their jobs are kind of threatened. But it has become apparent that that is not possible. We cannot do away with teachers or lecturers. They have to be there because they are the epitome of the learning process. They carry the knowledge. And therefore, all we need to do is to help them understand that they need to participate in this conversation. They need to be part and parcel of the success stories that are being written everywhere, and therefore be ready to go an extra mile to develop their content to the quality required. And that, of course, requires the motivation I talked about.
Yeah.
And they have to agree that the facilitation which is necessary here should come from even ourselves. You don't have to wait for somebody to buy you a laptop or a computer for you to develop your content. You must get the initiative of acquiring these devices yourself as a teacher, as a lecturer, because in any case, a good lecturer will need to publish. You publish or you perish. How do you do that if you don't have a computer?
Can't do it.
How do you search for the knowledge online if you don't have a laptop? So we are starting from the premise that every lecturer already has a laptop or a computer or a smart device.
That every lecturer
yes, it's
has
a very
that.
safe assumption to make.
Okay.
And because then how do you operate even in a face-to-face environment if you didn't have this device in the first place
to help you
for you to model whatever material you're using to teach, for you to research on the internet and complement your knowledge, for you to even publish your books, publish online? You need a laptop. And that is an assumption we are making, that every lecturer, every teacher should have a smart device. Absolutely.
We've looked at how we're going to do infrastructure, and now all this, flipping a classroom, necessarily we have to have content. So the problem is, we can do all these things, and is our content quality enough to ensure the learner learns maximally while we are going to this digital platform?
How do we define content? Thank you, Leah, for that question.
Professor, as you define content, then define quality content.
Yes,
so that we can have a difference. What exactly is content and what is quality content? So those who don't have quality content will get to know whether they do or not.
Yes, I would not try to endeavor to give a definition of which can be at the beginning and the end of it, but rather to invoke our thinking about what content is. Content is the knowledge that we want to deliver. You start from specific objectives, from the aims that you want to achieve in a specific course, and break that down into specific topics that you want to utilize to achieve that particular aim. And then those topics together will form some content for delivery to achieve those objectives. And the representation and rendition of this content in itself is part of the content, because content must be held somehow, must be packaged. So you have the topics, you have the necessary modules that you have, but you complement that using various tools. Content will be rendered in text format. Content can be rendered in video format. You render content in graphics format. You render content in audio. You render it in simulation models. So all that is part of what I can call the content itself. Both the knowledge and the presentation of that knowledge in those various modes.
You've gone ahead of me. I wanted to ask, how do you make the content in a presentable way such that I, the student, or the person at the receiving end, doesn't get bored? You know, sometimes watching or staying online in this virtual world, you can see someone on Zoom on a meeting, but what is it? Their video is off, their voice is off, they are only showing up for the meeting. When you try to call their name or something, you probably cannot find them. Or they're just there, they are waiting for a time to be called. Leah, they say their bit, and then they leave. So how are we going to make this content user-friendly or learner-friendly, and to an extent you know that the learner will not deviate, but the learner will read or learn or participate in that Google Meet class or Zoom class consistently to the end, and by doing that, the end result is that learning will be achieved?
Yes, most educationists will tell you that content should be packaged in a manner that it is like a costume that you put on when you're going to swim. In other words, have sufficient content, not too much of it, to the extent that it confuses the learner, and let the learner continue to clothe that person who is swimming with the additional knowledge that he or she is building in the process. So what am I saying here? The learner should be able to access the content in corpuscles or in small quantities, so as to continue the construction of knowledge. And therefore the content developer, the instructor, the person who is the knowledge expert should structure the content in such a manner, and this is a very serious process. It requires the expert knowledge to do it. And that's why the training we talked about is necessary. You structure the content into portions, so that the portions are able to achieve objectives in a graceful manner, in an incremental manner. And that will help the learner to appreciate the steps required to build that capacity, that aptitude required at the end of that particular subject. So this is a very specialized process which requires training, and therefore if you don't do it well, then you lose out on that pedagogical aspect required in the teaching profession, that you give content in portions that will achieve the objectives incrementally. And when you pump too much of it at the same time, then the process of retention of what the learner is learning is hampered. That is one aspect of the engineering of the content. The other aspect is on the quality, which I mentioned here. Quality content. How do we define quality content? Quality content is that which achieves the objectives that you have set, that is rendered using all those various tools and media that I've mentioned here. It is content that is exciting for the learner to go through. You're looking at a little video clip that captures the imagination of the student on a specific idea or concept. You're talking about a well-crafted narrative, not just picked from somewhere and dumped there for the student to go through, but well packaged and put in the context within the environment of the learner. If you're talking about Abbott was a very important book we used for physics in high school, and it was written by a Briton. I think it was one of the best books for physics in my years.
In your time.
But the examples which were there, some of them we could only imagine. When they are talking about an ATM, we can only imagine how it is. So I can say during our time, our imagination skills were very high. But now this time around, we must kind of develop content using the environment of the learner, so that the learner is able to pick these things quickly and build that model required for achieving the objective. So quality content must also be reviewed. When we develop content for online use, that content must go through a process. There is the person who developed the content. There is the reviewer who looks at the content to confirm that indeed it is quality content, it achieves the objectives which are set, it is properly packaged, it is from sources which are credible, the references are available and can be confirmed, and of course the structure of the content is that which is agreed upon. Then there is the next level where you now subject it to peer recognition, so that when it is recognized by the peers as good content, then you can actually say that this content is of high quality before you give it to the consumers.
That's a lot of information, and as you can see, quality content must meet its objectives. Quality content must achieve its particular goals. And so just before we climax on this discussion, we have a few questions that we will answer. One is Simon Mashari on YouTube asks, a good number of learners got violation. They do not feel motivated enough. Prof, what do you suggest on how to solve this? So the question is, what do you suggest, or what is your opinion in motivating the learner?
What's the question exactly? Violation is using a word.
A good number of learners got, got abolition.
Okay.
They do not feel motivated enough. What does Prof suggest and how to solve this?
Good. Thank you for that question from that student. I have already alluded to various aspects of motivation. And to me, the important is to appreciate that learning takes place as effectively online as it is on face-to-face. That is one thing that I want the learners to know. The teacher that we are used to, or the lecturer that stands before us in front of the class and delivers a lecture, that lecturer or teacher has given the knowledge that he was going to give, he or she was going to give, and packaged it into a manner that you can access it and get the same objectives achieved using that knowledge which has been packaged into an online model. That's the first thing I want the learners to appreciate. The second is the learner should not have the challenge of access, both from the device perspective and from the internet connectivity. Because when you have these challenges, then the learner is likely to lose hope and get demotivated, and of course spend more time dealing with the device, the availability of the internet if it is not of good connection, than to spend time to internalize the content himself. So that's the second aspect of how to ensure that the learners are well motivated. And the third one, I think, is to try these things. We can say that without experience, you will not be able to know what is in there. So I encourage our students, go and embrace e-learning, embrace online learning, and you will not regret. The experience is great. Thank you.
Students, the same way you've embraced Instagram and Facebook, embrace online learning on either of the platforms it will be used. On our last question are two intertwined questions on YouTube. Janet Harrison asks, we have seen some universities do exams online. How are these exams marked? And then Joyce Agalo asks, how do we deal with the issue of integrity of online exams? The question of possible cheating in exams. I wish these two would recall back on our previous show and get to listen through it on necessary reforms for digital learning. This was partly addressed, but for their sake, you will give them a flip of an answer, on a short answer, then they will review the previous show.
Thanks for those questions from Janet and of course Joyce Agalo, I think my colleague. It's the Joyce Agalo I know, the DVC of Machakos. Good questions in terms of how to carry out exams online and the integrity of these exams. You see, when you have taught in a semester and you want to bring the semester to a close and allow the students to progress to the next level, how do you do that? You must evaluate them.
Yes.
And it must be summative evaluation in our current system. So if you provided the teaching and you believe it is sufficiently done, then you can evaluate these students. However, if there are certain components missing, such as the practicals, which may not have been done at the time we broke for the COVID-19 situation, then you may have to look at these practicals, how they can be done. But let us assume that the learning has taken place. We assume that the course has already been concluded. Now you want the student to go through an exam. I think it is possible, and those who have conducted exams online, I'm sure it was done properly. We have various ways of doing that. The questions, of course, have to be done in such a way that they're more application oriented. And then secondly, you can use proctoring software. A proctoring software is one that enables the invigilator to be available at the student computer. So you're having a software, an invigilator in the form of software, and they can be able to see if the student is doing anything that is illegal. And then number three, you need to look at the examination policies, which is, I think, the next part of this discussion. What the exams policy say, and if that is not provided for, then we need to change our policies to allow for examinations online. So the integrity of exams online lies on the preparations that you make. In fact, I know some universities did mock exams before the real exams was done. You need to allow the students to do videos. You have a video conferencing session with the student as the student is doing the exam, so that you are watching what the student is doing. And if you're looking at application oriented questions, it is rather very difficult for a student who wants to pass an exam to go on checking for the answers and then come and write. First, the time may not allow. Secondly, they may not find the answers right on the various materials they are looking at. So it is doable, and I believe the integrity of the exams can be assured if we embrace those various techniques I mentioned.
Time is not on our side, and so we will end this here, but I would ask Prof to make a parting shot on what will you advise on the relevant stakeholders and anything. Time is not on our side, so we will have a short parting shot on what we need to do?
I will put it this way. The last part, the parting shot will be in the form of expounding on the fifth necessary condition of the policy guidelines. Here, I'm asking universities across our territory to look at the policy guidelines required for us to embrace e-learning. These range from looking at the statutes which are there, looking at the examination policies which are there, and any other guidelines which help us to do exams online, guidelines that help us to do online teaching, all these things, right from at the university level, at the regulatory level, the Commission for University Education, and even at the government level. What are these policies, acts, laws that will enable us have online teaching and examinations effectively without having any challenges which are of legal nature? Thank you very much, and it's great to have this show.
Thank you. As I said, online learning is the next big thing, and you and me need to incorporate it. Lecturers and relevant stakeholders in learning institutions step up and adopt this system. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us, and thank you, dear viewer. I hope you've learned and you've benefited from this discussion. Until next time, stay safe.
Thank you.
Are you a lecturer? Are you a tutor? Are you an instructor? Do you wish to make learning efficient and effective? You can now reach out to your learners online using technology. Introducing Bafunde. Bafunde supports trainers and educators in organizations, universities, and colleges to prepare and deliver digital content to boost interactions and learning. Visit our website at bafunde.com and register now. Bafunde, enhancing learning.